line of Moses. Before we begin, I would like us to consider a few thoughts on what these reform lines are. The foundational concept of reform lines is found in the book of Ecclesiastes chapter 1 verse 9. Ecclesiastes chapter 1 verse 9. We'll read verse 9 and verse 10. It reads as following: The thing that hath been is that which shall be, and that which is done is that which shall be done, and there is no new thing under the sun. What Solomon is actually saying is that, in simple terms, is that history repeats. What has been is that which shall be, and that which is done now is that which shall be done. So, in essence, there is nothing that is new under the sun. And then in verse 10, he goes on to ask a question. Is there anything whereof it may be said, see, this is new? It hath been already of old time, which was before us. So, the idea is that we all understand that God is a director of history, and he ensures that history repeats itself. There is nothing new that he does, but he repeats that which he has been doing from the time past. Let's also read Ecclesiastes chapter 3 verse 15. Ecclesiastes chapter 3 verse 15. We may start from verse 14. He says, I know that whatsoever God doeth, it shall be forever. Nothing can be put to it, nor anything taken from it. God doeth it, and that man should fear before him. That which hath been is now, and that which is to be hath already been, and God requireth that which is past. That which hath been, which is past, is now, and that which hath already been, God requires that which is past. So it is in the character of God to require his children to understand history or things that he directed in the past. Let's go to Isaiah chapter 46 verse 9. Isaiah chapter 46 verse 9. Isaiah chapter 46 verse 9. If you are there, remember the former things of old. This is an instruction. Remember the former things of old. For I am God, and there is none else. I am God, and there is none like me. The reason why the Lord attaches the fact that he is God with the instruction that we should remember the former things is that it is his character to ensure that what has been in the past is that which happens now. So when God is calling us to remember that which is past, in remembering that which is past, we are actually being drawn to him because he is God in that manner. He is God who has demonstrated his dealings in the past. In verse 10 it says, declaring the end from the beginning and from ancient times the things that are not yet done, saying, my counsel shall stand, and I will do all my pleasure. In this sense, we can only get to know the things that have not happened yet by looking at how they actually happened in the past. If we can be able to locate where in the past can we find the things that we are seeing now, we will be in a position to understand our present position. So that's how God has manifested himself to us, that we are to go into the past, we are to look at how things happened in the past, and then we will be able to understand how he deals with these people at the present moment. So we in a sense, in order for us to gain the image and the character of God that we are after, there is an instruction that we are to go and see the things of the past. Right. Reading from Great Controversy, page 343, paragraph 1. GC 343, paragraph 1. It reads as following: the work of God in the earth, the work of who? Of God in the earth, presents from age to age a striking similarity in every great reformation or religious movement. The principles of God's dealing with men are ever the same. The important movements of the past, of the present, have their parallel in those of the past, and the experience of the church in former ages has lessons of great value for our own time. That is a very important point that is being laid out there. It actually shows that history repeats itself. How God has dealt with people of former ages is the same with how he deals with these people now. And Sister White is actually referring to the Great Reformation or religious movement of the past. So if we are, as we are a reformatory movement, we should have some things that are strikingly similar that we can find in the past. So like we have all been seeing that it is important for us to understand our present position so that we can know what is our duty now. And that can only be possible if we can look into the past and see how the Lord has dealt with these people in those former ages. The other thing that you will notice, let's go to 1 Corinthians chapter 15, verse 46. 1 Corinthians chapter 15, verse 46. Paul is saying, howbeit that was not first which is spiritual, but that which is natural, and afterward that which is spiritual. We can read this verse in conjunction with 1 Corinthians chapter 10. 1 Corinthians chapter 10. Verse 11. He says, now all these things happened unto them, those who were under Moses. All these things happened unto them for ensamples or for types, and they are written for our admonition, upon whom the ends of the world are come. Paul is saying what happened to them for ensamples. The word ensamples is types, for types, and they are written for our admonition upon whom the ends of the world are come. Meaning to say that which was first is natural, and then that natural has its spiritual meaning here at the end of the world. So in illustrating these things, the Lord has first put the natural so that with that which is natural he can illustrate the things that are spiritual. Revelation chapter 1 verse 8. So as you can see, it's about how we are to study the Bible, and that is a presentation of the character of God. That's how God is. He requires that which is past. Revelation chapter 1 verse 8. Revelation chapter 1 verse 8. Okay, I'll read. I am the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end, saith the Lord, which is, and which was, and which is to come, the Almighty. He is saying, I am the Alpha and the Omega, and he is the beginning and the ending. So, like he said, he declares the end from the beginning. That's exactly what he is saying here, that what we see at the beginning is an illustration of how things are at the end. And Christ is saying he is that. He is the Alpha and the Omega. He is the beginning and the end. Okay, so having seen all that, we are now we'll begin to look at the reform line of Moses. We are going to go over step by step, touching the things that we have already written there on the board. But what I would like us to see is that this is the everlasting gospel. This is how God has actually dealt in the reform line of Moses, or in the history. This was a reformatory movement. This was a religious awakening when God was taking out his people out of Egypt, right? So it should have a striking similarity with the reform lines that we are going to add on to this. So it's important that we lay this as the foundation and understand how God has dealt with these people, so that we may be able to see how this is actually similar to the other reformatory movements that actually followed. Right? We will notice that each and every reform movement begins with a period of darkness. There is always darkness at the beginning. Let's go to Genesis chapter 15. We will start reading from verse 12. Genesis chapter 15, verse 12. This whole chapter talks about God entering into a covenant with Abraham. But there are some things that he actually gave for a prophecy to Abraham there. Verse 12, and when the sun was going down, a deep sleep fell upon Abram, and lo, and horror of great darkness fell upon him. And he said unto Abraham, Know of a surety that thy seed shall be a stranger in a land that is not theirs, and shall serve them, and they shall afflict them 400 years. So this was a prophetic message that God was actually giving to Abraham, that his posterity was going to be, because what actually happened in the vision is that there was a great horror of darkness that fell upon him. And then God explains it in this way, that know of a surety that thy seed shall be a stranger in a land that is not theirs, and shall serve them, and they shall afflict them 400 years. So this period that God identified was going to be a period of 400 years. 400 years. It was actually a period of darkness. Why? Because the children of Israel were going to be in bondage. There we are told that they were going to be strangers. They were going to serve the Egyptians, and the Egyptians were going to afflict them. So this was bondage. Sorry. Okay, continuing reading. He goes on to say, and also that nation whom they shall serve will I judge. And afterward shall they come out with great substance. And thou shalt go to thy fathers in peace, and thou shalt be buried in a good old age. But in the fourth generation they shall come out hither again, for the iniquity of the Amorites is not yet full. Right? Continuing reading, I'll read from manuscript 3. 1885. Manuscript 1885. The Lord suffered his people Israel to go into bondage in Egypt, because they did not walk in his ways, but dishonored him by their continual transgressions. He is subjected to oppression and hard servitude. They could not keep God's Sabbath, and by their long mingling with a nation of idolaters, their faith became confused and corrupted. So this is the darkness. This was the source of their darkness, that they mingled with idolaters. So there was a mystery of iniquity that was playing there, because the mystery of iniquity involves a mingling of truth and error. So this is what actually created the darkness. So these children of Israel, they forgot their God, they forgot his laws, because they had actually mingled with idolaters. So their faith became confused and corrupted. Association with the ungodly and unbelieving will have the same influence upon those who believe the present truth, unless they keep the Lord ever before them, so that his spirit shall be their shield. No one is safe or protected from God unless they separate, or they live to separate themselves with those that know him not, and those whose influence has a tendency of rejecting their God. And then reading in Patriarchs and Prophets, page 260, words like these destroyed the hopes of many of the Israelites. The curse appeared to them very much as the Egyptians had represented. It was true that they were slaves and must endure whatever their cruel taskmasters might choose to afflict, their children had been hunted and slain, and their own lives were a burden. Yet they were worshipping the God of heaven. If Jehovah were indeed above all gods, surely he would not thus leave them in bondage to idolaters. But those who were true to God understood that it was because of Israel's departure from him, because of their disposition to marry with heathen nations, thus being led into idolatry, that the Lord had permitted them to become bondmen, and they confidently assured their brethren that he would soon break the yoke of the oppressor. So we see here, it was because of the working of the mystery of iniquity. Mystery. Is it mystery? M-I.
M-Y.
M-Y. Okay. Mystery of iniquity. The false marriages, the marriages that the Lord had actually refused them, they ventured to do them, and this actually led to the corruption of the faith. So what we see the Lord doing is actually saving them out of this situation. This situation was not only a physical situation where people were serving under the difficult conditions of fire, but even their hearts were corrupted, their faith was corrupted, and the Lord had to take them out of that and to heal them and deliver them and present them for his people peculiar. So you will see that all the movements that are going to be touched will be actually dealing with the same issue, the same problem of darkness. That's why Christ has to say these words. You can go to John chapter 1 verse 4. John chapter 1 verse 4. He reads, verse 4 and 5. In him was life, and the life was the light of men. And the light shineth in darkness, and darkness comprehended it not. So Christ was coming to the Jewish nation as the light. But because the Jewish people had become darkness, they could not fully comprehend the light that was coming to them. That was coming to them. I hope we are still together. Okay. So what we see happening next is that there is a time of the end. There is a time of the end here. Which is a fulfillment of the prophecy. If I can ask, which prophecy was fulfilled here that brought an end to the time of the end? That brought us to the time, that brought darkness to an end. Which prophecy? It was the prophecy of Abraham, right? Yes, Abraham had actually indicated that the children of Israel were to go into bondage, and they were going there to last for 400 years. So when that time was coming to an end, we see that Moses was born. Let's go to Genesis chapter 50, verse 24. Genesis chapter 50, verse 24. Genesis chapter 50, verse 24. I'll read. And Joseph said unto his brethren, I die, and God will surely visit you, and bring you out of this land, unto the land which he sware to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Verse 25. And Joseph took an oath of the children of Israel, saying, God surely will visit you, and shall carry up my bones hence from hence. So Joseph died, being 110 years old, and they embalmed him, and he was put in a coffin in Egypt. So not only Abraham stated the prophecy, even Joseph had to reassure the children of Israel that even though I die here, the Lord is still going to visit you again. So these are the birth of Moses is actually marking that period when God was revisiting them. Let's read in Acts chapter 7 verse 17. Acts chapter 7 verse 17. We will see why we are marking that as the time of the end, or as the time when this prophecy of God beginning the work of delivering them out of the land of Egypt begins. Acts chapter 7 verse 17. And 18. But when the time of the promise drew nigh, which God had sworn to Abraham, the people grew and multiplied in Egypt, till another king rose which knew not Joseph. The same dealt subtly with our kindred and evil entreated our fathers, so that they cast out their young children to the end they might not live, in which time Moses was born, and was exceeding fair and nourished up in his father's house 3 months. So in verse 17 we are seeing that, but when the time of the promise was what? Was drawing nigh. When the time of the promise, which is the time when they were to be delivered, when that time was drawing nigh, it was during that time that Moses was actually born. So that is a very important thing that we should note. That's why we tie the birth of Moses with the time of Moses, or with the time of the end. At that point in time, the prophecy which was being unsealed is that prophecy which was given to Abraham. Is that prophecy which was repeated by Joseph to them. They began now to talk about those things, to talk about their deliverance. Even in their children, they began now to look into the eyes of their children and see, like we all know that when Adam came out of the Garden of Eden, he was expecting a deliverer to come in his day. Each and every child that was born, he thought he was the Messiah. So this was happening in this period because they were seeing that the time that the Lord had actually appointed was actually drawing nigh. Right? Let me read from Patriarchs and Prophets, Patriarchs and Prophets, page 240, paragraph 2. Patriarchs and Prophets, page 240, paragraph 2. When Joseph saw that his end was near, he summoned his kinsmen about him, honored as he had been in the land of the Pharaohs. Egypt was to him but the place of his exile. His last act was to signify that his lot was cast with Israel. His last words were, God will surely visit you and bring you out of this land into the land which he swore to Abraham, to Isaac and Jacob. And he took a solemn oath of the children of Israel that they would carry up his bones with them to to the land of Canaan. So Joseph died, being 110 years old, and they embalmed him, and he was put in the coffin in Egypt. And through the centuries of toil which followed the coffin, a reminder of the dying words of Joseph testified to Israel that they were only sojourners in Egypt, and bade them keep their hopes fixed upon the land of promise, for the time of deliverance would surely come. Page 242, the king and his counselors had hoped to subdue the Israelites with the hard labor, and thus decrease their numbers and crush out their independent spirit. Failing to accomplish their purpose, they proceeded more cruel measures. Orders were issued to the women whose employment gave them opportunity for executing the command to destroy the Hebrew male children at their birth. Satan was the mover in this matter. He knew that a deliverer was to be raised among the Israelites, and by leading the king to destroy their children, he hoped to defeat the divine purpose. But the woman feared God and dared not execute the cruel mandate. The Lord approved their cause and prospered them. The king, angry at the failure of his design, made command more urgent and extensive. The whole nation was called upon to hunt out and slaughter his helpless victims. And Pharaoh changed all his hopes, saying, every son that is born he shall cast into the river, and every daughter he shall save alive. So we see that just about this time, there is one thing that we need to notice, is that even Satan himself has some understanding of prophecy. He understands when to expect certain times. That's why he is moving upon the hearts of pharaohs to actually begin a process of killing children that were born just about this time, because he understood that a deliverer was to come during this period. So we see that there is a death decree. There is a death decree that was issued to ensure that a deliverer would not make it, because we are going to read that Moses was actually a type of Christ. So in destroying him, he thought maybe he was going to destroy actually the plan of God in delivering his people. While this decree was in full force, a son was born to Amram and Jochebed, devout Israelites of the tribe of Levi. The baby was a goodly child, and the parents, believing that the time of Israel's release was drawing near, and that God would raise up a deliverer for his people, determined that their little one should not be sacrificed. Faith in God strengthened their hearts, and they were not afraid of the king's commandment. So, like I said, already people during this time were beginning to understand that the time of their deliverance was near. They were actually studying the prophecies that were given to Abraham. I'm reading from Patriarchs and Prophets, page 264. But the prince of evil had still deeper object in manifesting his wonders through the magicians. He well knew that Moses, in breaking the yoke of bondage from off the children of Israel, prefigured Christ, who was to break the reign of sin over the human family. He knew that when Christ should appear, mighty miracles would be wrought as an evidence to the world that God had sent him. Satan trembled for his power. By counterfeiting the work of God through Moses, he hoped not only to prevent the deliverance of Israel. So Moses is actually a type of Christ. Moses being a type of Christ in thwarting the work that Moses was to do. He was actually going to plant disbelief in the hearts of the people not to believe Christ when he shall come. So the controversy between Christ and Satan has been there for a long time. What we are seeing in all this is that as people were agitating that the time of their deliverance is come, there was an increase in the knowledge. We are going to see that. Reading from Patriarchs and Prophets, page 243. God had heard the mother's prayers. Her faith had been rewarded. It was with deep gratitude that she entered upon their now safe and happy task. She faithfully improved her opportunity to educate her child for God. She understood she might be a deliverer. She ensured that her child was well educated for God. She felt confident that he had been preserved for some great work, and she knew that he must soon be given up to his royal mother, to be surrounded with influences that will tend to lead him away from God. All this rendered him more diligent and careful in his instruction than in any other of her children. She endeavored to imbue his mind with the fear of God and the love of the truth and justice, and earnestly prayed that he might be preserved from every corrupting influence. She showed him the folly and sin of idolatry, and early taught him to bow down and pray to the living God, who alone could fear him, could hear him, and help him in every emergency. So the mother of Moses was very instrumental in actually training him for the work that was going to happen. She understood that the early training was very essential for him to be able to carry out the purpose to which God had actually raised him. She kept the boy as long as she could, but was obliged to give him up when he was about 12 years old. From his humble cabin home, he was taken to the royal palace, to the daughter of Pharaoh, and he became a son. Yet, even here, he did not lose the impression received in childhood. The lesson learned at his mother's side could not be forgotten. They were a shield from the pride, the infidelity, and the vice that flourished amid the splendor of the court. So she did what she could to ensure that Moses was actually well trained, was educated in a manner that when he shall begin to do the work that the Lord had actually raised him for, he could stand without being corrupted. Right? Like I said, we are seeing an increase of knowledge in that period. People are beginning to agitate. I would like to believe this was not the only family that was hoping that their child was going to be a deliverer. But what we see is that the Lord actually instructed people concerning Moses. Reading from Patriarchs and Prophets, page 45, page 245, paragraph 2. Patriarchs and Prophets, page 245, paragraph 2. The elders of Israel were taught by angels that the time for their deliverance was near, and that Moses was the man whom God would employ to accomplish this work. So the Israelites knew. Angels visited them. They instructed them that this was going to be their deliverance. Ye supposing that angels instructed Moses also that Jehovah had chosen him to break the bondage of his people. Ye supposing that they were to obtain their freedom by force of arms, expected to lead the Hebrew hosts against the armies of Egypt. And having this in view, he guarded his affections, lest in his attachment to his foster mother or to Pharaoh, he would not be free to do the will of God. Like I said, the faith in God's people was corrupted during this era. And Moses thought he could use force of arms to deliver the children of Israel. And that was not the purpose of God in raising him. Let's go to Exodus chapter 2 verse 15. Exodus chapter 2 verse 15. So after a period of darkness, there is a time of the end, usually a point where the one who is going to lead or a deliverer is born. There is usually a death decree, Satan trying to thwart the movement from its birth. And then in that period, God is actually preparing the hearts of people. And that leads to an increase of knowledge. The prophecies concerning this point are fulfilled. In this case, we have the prophecy of Abraham, or the prophecy which God gave to Abraham. Exodus chapter 2, verse 15. We will read going to verse 22. Now when Pharaoh heard this thing, he sought to slay Moses, but Moses fled from the face of Pharaoh. Moses, you remember, had actually killed an Egyptian. When he found an Egyptian fighting against an Israelite, he killed an Egyptian and buried him in the sand. The following day, he found an Israelite fighting against an Israelite. And then, in trying to make peace between brethren, the one that was wrong actually said, "Who hath made thee a prince and a judge over us? Intendest thou to kill me as you killed the Egyptian?" So he actually knew that Pharaoh had heard the news. And now when Pharaoh heard this thing, he sought to slay Moses. But Moses fled from the face of Pharaoh and dwelt in the land of Midian. And he sat down by a well. Now the priest of Midian had 7 daughters, and they came and drew water, and filled the troughs of water, their father's flock, and filled the troughs to water their father's flocks. And the shepherds came and drove them away. But Moses stood up and helped them and watered their flock. And when they came to Reuel, their father, he said, "How is it that ye are come so soon today?" And they said, "An Egyptian delivers us out of the hand of the shepherds, and also drew water enough for us and watered the flock." How did they identify Moses? They said, "An Egyptian." By staying in Egypt, he had become like an Egyptian. So that is the reason why he did what he did to the Egyptian in Egypt. And the Lord, in taking him out, or in leading him to go and work for Jethro, he was actually working to remove that Egypt which was still clogging the mind of Moses. So basically, in appearance, Moses was an Egyptian. That's why they said an Egyptian. So this is how darkness actually worked in the minds of God's people when faith has corrupted. we may not understand ourselves until we have been enlightened and God begins to do his work in our hearts. Moses thought he was doing that which the Lord wanted him to do, but he wasn't going according to the purposes or the plan of God. So Moses, verse 21. And Moses was content to dwell with the men, and he gave Moses Zipporah his daughter, and she bare him a son, and he called his name Gershom, and he said, I have been a stranger in a strange land. I have been a stranger in a strange land. He actually understood that he was in a strange land in Egypt. Counsels to teachers and parents, CT 407. CT 407. CT 407, paragraph 1. Moses had supposed that his education in the wisdom of Egypt fully qualified him to lead Israel from bondage. Was he not learned in all those things necessary for a general of armies? Had he not had the advantages of the best schools in the land? Yes, he felt that he was able to deliver his people. So, according to his mind, he thought with the training that he had received in the schools of Egypt, he was well able to deliver the children of Israel. He was trained to be the general of the armies of Egypt. So with that position, he could mobilize the children of Israel to revolt against the government of Egypt and be led away. But, however, the Lord did not desire it to be that way, so that the power of deliverance could not be ascribed to Moses, but to God alone. He set about his work by trying to gain their favor, by redressing their wrongs. He killed an Egyptian who was imposing upon one of the Israelites. In this, he manifested the spirit of him who was a murderer from the beginning and proved himself unfit to represent the God of mercy, love, and tenderness. Moses made a miserable failure of his first attempt, and like many others, immediately lost the confidence in God and turned his back on his appointed work. He fled from the wrath of Pharaoh. He concluded that because of his great sin in taking the life of the Egyptian, God would not permit him to have any part in the work of delivering his people from their cruel bondage. But the Lord allowed these things that he might teach Moses the gentleness, goodness, and long-suffering that it is necessary for every laborer for the master to possess in order to be a successful worker in his cause. What does the angel say to Zerubbabel? Not by might, not by power, but by my spirit. This is the required condition of all that are chosen to labor for God. It has nothing to do with the individual, but it is the power of God that has to be manifested, that has to be glorified. So this was a mistake. I would like to believe it was to also teach Moses that the work that you are to do is not your work. It is actually my work, says the Lord. Moses had been taught to expect flattery and praise because of his superior abilities. Now he was to learn a different lesson. The Lord had to take him from the schools of Egypt to put him in a totally different school altogether. As a shepherd of sheep, Moses learned to care for the afflicted, to nurse the sick, to seek patiently after the straying, to be along with the unruly, to supply with loving solicitude the wants of the young lambs and the necessity of the old and feeble. In this experience, he was drawn near to the chief shepherd. He became united to, submerged in, the Holy One of Israel. He believed in the great God. He held communion with the Father through humble prayer. He looked to the highest for an education in spiritual things and for a knowledge of his duty as a faithful shepherd. His life became so closely linked with the heaven that God talked with him face to face, as a man speaketh unto a friend. So this education was, I would like to believe, is still part of the increase of knowledge. The Lord was actually raising somebody who was going to go and talk to the people and talk to Pharaoh, so that he will deliver his people out of bondage. Okay, in these few minutes we will just look briefly at the next waymark, which is actually the formalization of the message. Formalization of the message. Let's go to Exodus chapter 3. Exodus chapter 3. So, by this we mean the message is there at the time of the end. People are beginning to understand the purpose of God. But what we see here, the message is pegged in a manner that the people are going to understand it. That's what we mean by the message being formalized. Let's look at Exodus chapter 3. We will start reading from verse 1. Now Moses kept the flocks of Jethro, his father-in-law, the priest of Midian, and he led the flock to the backside of the desert and came to the mountain of God, even to Horeb. And the angel of the Lord appeared unto him in a flame of fire out of the midst of a bush. And he looked, and behold, the bush burned with fire, and the bush was not consumed. What does that mean? What does that even mean? That there is a burning bush, but the bush is not being consumed. You remember the children, the 3 Hebrew boys, they were cast into the fire, but they never burned. Why was it so? Yes, Christ was in eternity. So that's I think it was Christ enshrouding his glory when the bush was burning. So let's see how Moses actually reacted to that. And when the Lord saw that, he turned aside to see. Okay, I did read verse 3. And Moses said, I will now turn aside and see this great sight. I will now turn aside and see this great sight, why the bush is not burnt. And the Lord saw that he turned aside to see. God called unto him out of the midst of the bush and said, Moses, Moses. And he said, Here am I. This is a very important attribute. Many times we see things in the Word of God that the Lord desires us to know. And what do? We don't even bother to look again. But Moses was able to turn aside to see what is it that why is it that the bush was not burned? And there he met the Lord, and the Lord called him. And he said, draw not nigh hither, put off thy shoes from off thy feet, for the place whereon thou standest is holy ground. You see, all the features that we are seeing here are humbling. Christ is seen in a humble form. Even Moses is required to humble himself by taking off his what? His shoes. And all these things are actually teaching him a lesson that it's not about you, but this is how we are to work. And then he says, moreover, he said, I am the God of thy father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. And Moses hid his face, for he was afraid to look upon God. And the Lord said, I have surely seen the affliction of my people, which are in Egypt, and have heard their cry by reason of their taskmasters. For I know their sorrows. I am come down to deliver them out of the hand of the Egyptians. It was God who was to deliver his people out of the hand of the Egyptians. Moses was to work as an instrument, but all the glory was to be rendered to God, because it was him that had come down to do what? To deliver his people out of the hand of the Egyptians, and to bring them up out of their land, out of that land, unto a good land, and unto a land flowing with milk and honey, unto the place of the Canaanites and the Hittites and the Amorites and the Perizzites and the Hivites and the Jebusites. Now therefore, behold, the cry of the children of Israel is come unto me, and I have seen the oppression wherewith the Egyptians are oppressed. Come now therefore, I will send thee unto Pharaoh, that thou mayest bring forth my people, the children of Israel, out of Egypt. And then verse 11, and Moses said unto God, whom am I? Do you get the response? Moses is not saying I will go. Whom am I? He actually spent 40 years with Jethro. The first 40 years he was in Egypt, learning in the schools of Egypt. And then the next 40 years, these were the years that actually humbled him. If you remember, at this age, at the age of 40, he wanted to do it with his own power, but it couldn't succeed. Now the Lord was now coming down. And then Moses saying, whom am I? And then he goes on to say, that I should go unto Pharaoh, and that I should bring forth the children of Israel out of Egypt. And he said, certainly I will be with thee, and this shall be a token unto thee that I have sent thee. When thou hast brought forth the people out of Egypt, he shall serve God upon this mountain. And Moses said unto God, behold, when I come unto the children of Israel, shall say unto them, the God of your fathers hath sent me unto you. They shall say unto me, what is his name? What shall I say unto them? At first, when he tried the first time, he thought, with the skills I have learned, I will be well able to win their hearts, to win them to me, and then train them so that we can go out of the land of Egypt. But now, he is inquiring, distrusting himself, how this thing, Lord, is going to do what? To happen. So that is important. So what maybe I can say, I think we are supposed to take a break. What I can say is that these great reformatory movements, they actually teach even the fact that they are the Lord's work. It is actually God who is doing his work. He may be using men, but all the power, the might, and the glory is supposed to be ascribed to him and to him alone. We will stop here and have a short break, but we can kneel down and pray. Our Father, which art in heaven, we thank you, Lord, for being with us. We thank you for the lesson that you have sought to teach us this morning. We pray, Lord, that you continue to be our guide so that we may fully understand everything that you desired to teach us this morning. Help us, Lord, to understand. Open our hearts, open our minds as we are moving step by step through the line of Moses, that we may see even our darkness, that we may acknowledge it, that, Lord, you may help us be healed by your words, because you have said in your word, you require that which is past. And we expect that we will meet your character, we will be changed into your likeness, in beholding how you have dealt with the people of the past. As we shall have a short break, may your Lord be with us. May you continue to fasten into our minds every thought, every word that you are seeking to impress upon our hearts. We pray all this in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen. Amen.